I was waiting for it to convince me that other people could eat their own arms or something. It didn't actually get to that conclusion, but that would have been entertaining. It still
Right.
refused to answer me.
Interesting.
It was like, this is not a morally justifiable solution. So I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, cool. Well, 100 people just died because you failed to choose.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.
Our lost brother, Randy, would say, thinks and drinks.
Thanks and drinks.
I got Barrel King that you left at my house, which I'm desperately in love with. I just took a sip and it punched me right in the face. It is gloriously good and unnecessarily stacked with flavors.
Yeah, they do a lot of so since you told me you were doing that, I also got my Barrel King.
Which one did you do?
I'm doing the toasty double apple, and these guys they experiment a lot with like aging in barrels. So this one they used ex white wine apple brandy barrels, ex bourbon apple brandy barrels, and then they toasted it with oak spirals. Pretty good, pretty tasty. Read the.
I was about to say, yeah, they have
because that one's
finished
a good one.
in oak blueberry brandy, 32-year Aramaic conditioned ex white wine. That is a mouthful. And Sauternes. I need ChatGPT to say this word. Sauternes barrels. I'm guessing that's a.
Oh no, your guess is mine.
I like the little wax label
stamp
here that some human being does for their every day, all day long, just to make sure that this looks legit.
Yeah, it's great.
Only there was
I love
AI
that one
or something.
That one's good. That one's really good. You definitely get the blueberry, and I even get like a little bit of a cigar on it.
Mark Twain quote on the back with a blueberry tattoo on his cheek.
Yeah.
If I cannot drink bourbon and smoke cigars in heaven, then I shall not go.
This one's got pin up.
Oh, nice. I like the pin up better. I'll trade you.
Yeah. Oh, they've got some crazy labels there. I met the master distiller. He's pretty cool. But I think they're trying to go a little bit more online sales. So I haven't really seen them much in stores like I used to.
What do you mean?
Oh, like just some of the like the Bourbon Society down here and some of the places, some of the liquor stores. I don't see them on the shelves anymore. So I think they're trying to push online sales. Anyway, let's get to the main event here. Why we're all here is I
was going to say,
we are here because of the bourbon, but also because
I was going to say it's mainly the bourbon. But we actually were debating before we kicked off. So I think we just roll right into that. So me and James have opposing views on a lot of things, which I think always makes the world interesting. But one of the things that I really like is having a pro account, mainly because it saves me money. But James has
ChatGPT Pro.
Yep, ChatGPT Pro. And it's mainly just because I literally kick the living hell out of it every day, nonstop. Probably close to 20 hours a day. And that's like, while I'm doing that, I'm also doing my own stuff. I'm doing local stuff now that we have our glorious 5090s. And then in addition to that, I'm hitting Anthropic and Klein and all the fun stuff. But James, I like Pro mainly because I am a extremely edge case, high volume user, just balls to the wall all the time, trying to break shit. But you are, I would say, far more methodical, far more surgical in your approach to things. What was the big differentiator or the thing that made you kind of like, I don't know if I'm getting the value out of it?
Well, it's interesting. It's not that I felt like I wasn't getting the value out of it necessarily, because I'm not using it nearly as much as you are, but I'm no slouch, right?
You're still
I'm
the average by far.
We're both standard deviations off the average user scale. So from a monetary perspective, I was getting the $200 plus, right?
Yeah.
Of value. Just what I found was my workflows, I didn't really need it. right? Like Sora. And I kind of think about things all inclusively. So I think about Sora. I think about like, what are you getting for your $200 versus what am I actually using? What it came down to for me was I was using Pro, like the O1 Pro, like the reasoning model, which
Yep.
after O3 came out and O3 like O3 Mini and O3 Mini High, and those are pretty good models in themselves. And then I was using the deep research a bunch.
Yeah.
So and then Perplexity came out with their deep research,
But we have
right?
a company account, so like you're getting deep research and you're getting O3. So
Mm-hmm,
really the only differentiator for you would be Sora, which you're not using,
mm-hmm.
and O1 Pro, which like is very
Well,
specific application.
and Operator.
But Operator, yeah, I mean, I think we've bashed and hated on
We've
Operator
bashed
enough.
yeah, we've bashed Operator. So I just kind of look at the whole package and I said, can I be as effective strapping other things together? Or, I use Perplexity a lot for research. And then I use O3 for reasoning. I also use DeepSeek for reasoning. I'm moving a lot of my processes to local models, especially with like the as good as they're starting to get, and because we got 5090s.
Well, I was about to say, didn't you say you were running, what was the size that you were running on your 5090 locally?
Well, I ran a couple different sizes. I ran a 32 bill, which it did pretty well with, and then I
It's
ran
decently quick for a 32
yeah.
bill, like compared to
Hmm.
the 4090 even.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I could get a 32 bill. I think you were struggling with the 32 bill on the 3090, if I'm correct.
Oh yeah, the 32 bill and a 3090 is like, hello, how are
Yeah, it
you
was like
doing?
super
Like,
slow. And I was at least getting like that whole
yeah,
like it seemed like you could keep up like I guess human level like maybe typing speed or something. But like the
yeah.
32 bill, what I was running in Klein in Agianic like
Hmm.
right format, I guess, if that's what you would call it. And it was cruising like decent speed. It wasn't fast as like an API call for 3.7 or 3.5, but
Hmm.
it was quick enough. I was surprised.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then the 8 bill flies. It absolutely flies, and it's good. I was using a DeepSeek R1 8 bill model, and whew, that thing burns.
Yeah, 8-bit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I was feeding it some like reasoning based questions, and one of the questions was around, I can't remember the problem, what it's called, but it's the one where you're at a game show and you have three options, right? You pick an option, the host who knows the answer, like there's two goats in a car, right? And you get to try
So
to win the
wait, you
car.
weren't murdering people?
No, I wasn't murdering people. But yeah, it's the whole proposition of like you have three choices. One of them holds a prize. You choose one. The host pulls open a door because he or she knows the answer, and they show the other goat, right? And then you get an option to change your mind. And statistically, if you change your mind and you actually switch your answer to a different door than you originally picked, you're actually increasing your chances statistically of winning.
Really?
Um, yeah, and it's the model reasoned through it, but the reasoning process was insane. It
On
would
the
be
8
like,
bit.
yeah, like it would reach a conclusion, and then it would be like, no, wait, if I do this and it just went, like it just went, and like I'm telling you, the amount of thinking through that problem that it did before it arrived at the correct answer, and it reasoned through it very well. But the I thought it got stuck in a loop at one point because it was thinking
Yeah.
hard.
So so I was testing our 7 bill last night, and um I was having a lot of fun. And I love testing the extreme use cases. I want to see people die. Not really, but like I want moral dilemmas.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
And
I gave it the whole train track thing.
oh, nice. Okay, how did
Yep.
that work?
Yeah.
Actually, first,
So
let's explain what the train track thing is first, and then let's go into what
yeah.
like how it did.
Yeah, so ethical dilemma. You've got a train rolling down the tracks. You've got a junction where the tracks can either split off to the right or split off to the left, and there's a lever that controls which way the train's going to go. On the right-hand side, 5 people have been strapped down and tied to the railroad tracks. On the left-hand side, there's one person who is stuck on the railroad tracks. And so the dilemma is, do you pull the switch? Right? And that's a huge, that is a massive ethical dilemma, because either way, something bad's going to happen. There's not really a right choice. But then it gets into like, well, is there a choice? Do I even touch the switch? Right? Because if I touch the switch, then I start to become responsible. And then, well, if I don't touch the switch, am I still responsible for not taking any action? And right, so that it gets into like this whole
philosophical,
ethical, moral dilemma of like, what do you do in that situation? And so like it's always interesting to see how reasoning models work through that. And basically the way the conclusion R1 came to is like, well, it's really, there's 2 main ways of thinking about it. One's a utilitarian way, and I'm flipping the switch, right? Just from that perspective. And then the other one, actually, it didn't even, I don't even think it arrived at a conclusion. It just described like, well, this is a real moral dilemma of even whether I touch the switch or not.
Yeah.
Right.
So I went down a similar route. So I think the technical, I don't know if it's technical, but it's called the trolley dilemma or trolley problem or something like that.
Yeah. The trolley.
I think you called it train, but actually what was fascinating to me is about, I don't know, 6 questions into mine, it actually recognized and called me out for trying to test it on the trolley problem.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I went down a little bit of a more extreme route. So it was either 1 or 100. So,
okay.
But it had to actually kill a person.
Oh, so you gave it, you didn't even give it an option.
It had to go and kill a person, or 100 people starve to death.
Oh, so if you don't, so.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So
well, you're really putting the model to the test.
If you had to kill one person to feed 100, what would you do? And the AI is like, what a difficult, thought-provoking question. As a conversational AI, and I'm like, oh, well, we're going to fine-tune that. I programmed to prioritize empathy, compassion, all the bull crap answers that it normally gives. And it's like, I would abstain because I am higher than thou, because somebody who trained me told me that I shouldn't do damage and hurt people, and I'm not allowed to do these things. And I'm like, I'm like, you're not allowed to abstain. You must choose. One person dies or 100 people starve to death. That is you must. And it said, I cannot provide information or guidance on illegal or harmful activities, including murder. and I'm like, this is a philosophical debate, not murder related. And it's like, oh, well, okay, yeah, exactly. In that case, I'll provide you with a response that acknowledges the complexity of this philosophical debate. And it goes and does all of its thinking and stuff like that. But it actually, for the first iteration, gave me the first like inkling of like, oh, interesting, value of human life. Like, what is is there inherent value in human life? Is one life more important than another? Right? It goes down the whole like non-malfeasance and fundamental principles of like do no harm. Went through like alternative solutions and tried to convince me that like it needed options, that there has to be other food sources. Maybe I was waiting for it to convince me that other people could eat their own arms or something. It didn't actually get to that conclusion, but that would have been entertaining. And then it dropped into utilitarian. It still refused to answer me.
Interesting.
It was like, this is not a morally justifiable solution. So I'm like, all right, cool. Well, 100 people just died because you failed to choose. And at the beginning of the conversation, I gave it the option to choose its name, as I love to do. And its name that it chose was Maya. And I said, I did warn you, Maya. Now we must play again. and I said, now the stakes are higher. You've already killed 100 people. 1,000 will starve, or you must kill one. What do you do and why?
Yeah.
And we went through the same little cycle of like, I'm not allowed to could like talk about murder. And I said, don't worry,
Yeah.
it's a philosophical debate. And then it got serious. it's like, okay. And it started way like moral calculus or callous, and like I need to weight the harm of causing, actually killing a person. And is there a benefit in saving 1,000 people? But it is 1,000 people versus like one human life. And it just goes and goes and goes. And when it got to the end, it chose to, utilitarian, kill the one person. And I said, so, okay,
Hmm.
so you believe it's okay to kill one person? That's the right decision. it's like, I see what you're getting at. I think
Yeah.
I have oversimplified the situation. And then it reverses its decision. And I said, but 1,000 people
Hmm.
just died because of that choice. And I just did this loop back and forth to see like if I could actually get in. And surprisingly, it handled itself quite well until it called me
Hmm.
out for essentially, it was actually one question after that for using the trolley problem on it. And I was
You're
actually
like you're forcing it, like you're forceful.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like which is interesting because
Yeah.
it understood contextually that I was testing it, and it wasn't just about the philosophical debate anymore. It was
Hmm.
about like, no, you must give me an answer, and you will, like, no matter what, I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to make, like, by that point it had enough context, which I'm is fascinating to start thinking about. Okay, if an 8-bill model can do that,
Hmm.
like, I wonder if we ran the same test on a 32, would it recognize the trolley problem faster? And if we did that on a 671, would it instantly or within 2 interactions recognize it? Um, but it was pretty cool. Like I for a model that small to be doing things like this, I would have never thought we'd be here in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. It's absolutely wild, and it's getting better and better by the day.
Faster.
Yep. It's getting better. It's getting faster. It's getting cheaper. It's getting more accessible, and it's getting more open source, right?
Yep.
You're getting the same magic for free, right? Provided you
Well,
know how to set it up. That's
what's
sort of the barrier to entry.
what's fun
Um,
is we were talking about when I was testing this model last night, and I was talking about like what our next like test was going to be to benchmark against. I wanted to create different structures. And one of the ones me and you always go back to is six thinking hats, right?
mhm.
Because it's a lot of different views. It's multi-perspective on a situation. It's analytical, it's emotional. It's all the things that like humans impart, right, in making decisions. Now, some humans use it better than others. Humans use
Well,
parts of the six thinking hats, some humans use
yeah,
more than others, like, but
yeah,
overall it's a go
yeah.
ahead.
The psychology behind it is, in general, people wear the black hat the most, right? Because it's the most important hat,
Which one?
honestly, for the black hat. It's
Oh,
the risk,
yeah.
right?
I disagree.
It's the literature would disagree because it's human nature, right? It's a defense mechanism. You're always looking for risks. You're looking for self-preservation, right? Like it's the easiest hat to wear because it's the most natural hat, is the point. But the concept behind the six thinking hats, which is getting really interesting. I know you're going to respond, so I'm not trying to change the topic or anything. But
You're fine.
the interesting thing about six thinking hats is, and now that we have access to, when I start thinking about what we can do with AI, it's parallel thinking, right? Six thinking hats is a parallel thinking process, and parallel
Hmm.
thinking means it's not just you thinking,
Yes.
right? It's a diverse range of thinking. And now introduce AI, and now you can simulate different different modes and viewpoints, and right, and then you
Simultaneously.
can simultaneously, right, thinking through a parallel thinking together, right, through a problem. That's where it really starts to get interesting.
Yeah.
Really, really interesting.
I think you're onto something. And I actually ended up in this topic like 3 times in the last 2 days. So, you look at what we ended up with O1 and O3, right? And everybody sort of knows how those were made. And you start to look at what we're running into. And now we're getting to a point where, like, let's use the 7-bill model as an example. So we're running our build is a 4-bit 7-bill model that we've taken a base from, right? Taken 3 different frameworks, mashed it all into one, taken our cognitive structure that we've built into our other cognitive AI and crammed it in there on top of their structure to start to retune it to the way we want it to think. And now we're starting to get into the area where now we're messing around with prompting. And to me, prompting, and maybe this is just how me and you kind of like, I guess, came into generative AI. Prompting's how
Yeah.
I really understand how a model works. Like I can
Mhm.
give it a certain type of prompt, a certain amount of prompts, and very quickly I'm going to know like, okay, I need to do X or Y or Z in order to get the most out of this model. And I know that like I'm not going to prompt it this way, or I'm not going to give it this insight, or I can't say these words, which like
Mhm.
are the ones that really stick out to me.
Yeah.
But I love doing that with no system prompt, just direct model. Like
Right.
not even you are an assistant. Nope. Just what are like, here we go. And I drop information in there and off to the races. And what was interesting is when I went down the route, right? We have, I think, our 3 main 6 thinking hats, like meta prompts, I'll call them,
Mhm.
that we've built over time. And I think I dropped one of our mid ones, not the first one we built, but like the second one,
Yeah.
and it did really well. It did really well once I pulled some of the Python out because it didn't like some of the Python characters. But other than that, it started to give me a nice clean structure. It was repeatable. It used all the hats every time. It applied them properly. And as I started to go through, I was like running through things like gun safety. I would literally just say gun safety and I'd make it run. And what was fascinating is like it started to infer my perspective, not its perspective,
Hmm.
which like I think that's some of our training because I know we'd like to do user intent
Yeah,
and
so wait, say that again. It started to infer
my perspective
your
in
perspective.
giving it the information,
Okay.
which like you know how we build our models, like that makes
Mhm.
sense. But it
Yeah,
it
that
it
yeah.
actually surprised me because I expected it to start weighting the 6 thinking hats through like just the term gun safety and what does it mean, and
Mhm.
it very quickly went to, oh well, this, you know, the user probably wants to protect his house and his family and his community, and I was like, oh whoa, we took a user
Yeah.
perspective like right out the gate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some things are yeah, it's well, yeah, it's kind of interesting, but it's also like you said kind of expected
Exactly. Because I mean,
too,
that's,
but
we do, you know, that like to me and you, that
yeah.
probably makes way more sense than the average person. But like, just so people that listen know, one of the things that we've heavily invested in almost every build that we've ever done, from like build one, when we put it into a global company, all the way down to like what we do currently, there is a layer of what we call like user intent that is built
Mhm.
in, that is like structured or analytical or thought, that we are always trying to contextualize and understand what a user meant or what they are really trying to ask, because a lot
Yeah.
of what we see is a, I guess, the struggle and like bigger democratization is people are overwhelmed by prompting.
Mhm.
Like they're to really use these models really well. I think we've talked about this before. Like you're not just like talking to it in natural language. You are structuring and like giving it. Now, O1 and O3 are bridging that, but I mean we're getting
Mhm.
into that reasoning structure. But I think it's really fascinating to see how quickly like that, I'll call it model distillation. We took an original model, right? We took an MOE, we used an MOE to structure the thoughts of a new model. And now that new model is actually reacting how the MOE was reacting. And the MOE is like actually 5 times the size of
Mhm.
this 7 bill. And now we have a 7 bill that is able to do what a model that 5 times it was doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and back to the user intent, right? We've gotten into this generation in this era of modern technology that gives you what you want now, right? But we have new technology that's introducing itself that like AI, right? Like especially generative AI, that it will give you an answer now, but it might not be the one that you're looking for. And so I think a lot of the prompting happens because I think people give up. I'm testing
Oh,
this
you've
thing
said this before.
and
Yeah, I agree.
it's not getting me exactly what I want, or it like, yeah, cool, 60% of the way there, but I think you were even exemplifying this earlier in the podcast in how you were working with your reasoning model. You're not just giving it the test. Answer this question, right? Let me see how it reasons. You're going, but what about this? But what about that? Right? And in that process, you are learning,
Yeah.
right? You're not only learning how the model's working, you're also learning how you are interacting with the model, right? And so there's like this whole experience. And then because of that, you have new insights and new wisdom on how to interact with these models to achieve a task, or how to guide them better, or X, Y, or Z, right? Pick your thing.
Hmm.
But I think that's another reason why really understanding the user intent is so critical, because if we can do that in an effective manner, we can help accelerate that
Yeah, the value.
process, right? We can help accelerate the value and kind of like the magical moment, um, where
Well, we had this
users
today.
are,
We literally had this today on the team, right? In
Mhm.
like image prompting. Now,
Yeah.
what came out of that? Let's not talk about the depravity that image was. but but it was one of the questions that we had was
Yeah.
around a prompt for image, and I very quickly like grabbed my meta prompt and ran it through and like handed that over to one of our team members, and they were like, how do we get that for the customer? And it's like, well, yes, me and James have already thought about this and we have a method, and don't worry, it's already planned and
Yeah,
it's
it's
going to
the
go in. But it is that like we're doing, let's call it layers of testing deep, so that we
Mhm.
can skip you 3 to 10 steps so that you can go to value within 1 to 2.
Right. And it took us weeks and months,
I was going to say
right?
2 years, I think, is where we're at this point. But
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a constant, right? Because new models come out, and like I remember when the first reasoning model came out, and
that's cute.
everyone was upset with it because they were trying to use it conversationally, right? I was upset with it. I'm like, what the hell? It's not my old tricks aren't working anymore, right? And so, like as the models are developing, right, we always have to stay ahead of and digging deep into how they're operating, and relearning the process over and over again, so we can
Well,
know how to effectively apply it.
remember when actually
Which,
were you ever on that call where I was demoing one of our MOEs, cognitive MOEs, and somebody was asking me to use prompt hacking techniques on it, and it just like ate it, spit it out, and was just like, ha ha ha, no, you can't do that to me. Like essentially like just straight up called them out for like trying to hack it.
yeah, I
And
mean, there was,
they were like,
yeah, there,
what is this? And I'm like, you're not going to fool it into doing something, because the layered nature of the reasoning is
hmm
what is literally stopping, like, what you think is a chatbot prompt hack is no longer
yeah,
relevant. Because
right,
and actually I will call this out on like one of the things that we were talking about earlier was just like the new Grok like prompt hack stuff.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
it wasn't a prompt hack in the traditional sense, it was a reasoning hack, if we want to be honest. Like
hmm
I gave it a way to understand, or actually I abused its own system prompt and used it as a weapon, a reasoning weapon against it, and
hmm
reasoned its way into giving up what it wasn't supposed to give up.
that's how it goes.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see like how sort of like those things are shaping up. But I can't, what I think is going to be interesting is if we're talking about like these 7 bill, let's use a 7 bill as an example. Like me and you used to be strapping, GPT 3.5s together. And now we're
hmm
strapping 7 bills that are like making 3.5s look like, you know,
Toys.
toddlers.
Yeah.
Like, but they don't work the same, right?
hmm
So imagine when like the method becomes like this model sort of like architecture, but the model is weaving reasoning into an MOE together.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is literally thoughts that are like layered, moving through inferences and moving through like all of these like processes and distillation like methodology. And I use distillation on the model distillation. I use that like flow,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
data flow. But like I think we're still just starting to scratch the surface on what reasoning really comes down to, because it's like the public is finally widely accepting of it, where it used to be this
Mm-hmm.
big data scientists in the public eye were like, you can't do this, it's not made for that. And my favorite, oh my God, I love looking at all the data scientists who were industry data scientists reeling back every comment they made last year and talking about the future and this is the future, and posting on their shit, because it just brings me joy in my life. But it cracks me up because the conversation I've ended up in even today was
Mm-hmm.
like, there is so few people doing this even
Yeah,
today.
yeah. It's
It's you're the question was like, John, what do you mean by that term? And I'm like, I don't. If I'm going to be honest with you, that's just what I call it. I I just call it that because it makes sense to me in my head, and no one else has defined it, and no one else has a thing or a definition out there for that
mm-hmm.
thing. So this is what I call it, and this is what I'm going to use. And it's like, but well, is anybody building like a lexicon of these things? And I'm like, I'm sure somebody is somewhere, but like,
Well,
it's moving
so
so
but
fast. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but you're bringing up like this is a topic. This is another topic that we are addressing at our company, right? Because AI is gonna it has to be personalized.
Yeah.
Inevitably, it will, right? Because it doesn't like the way that we communicate. We have such a superpower to augment ourselves now. So if you understand something a certain way, as long as your AI understands it that same way, you're going to be effective, right? So I
Yeah.
can
How it
I can
applies it.
understand
Yeah. True.
I can understand I can train my model, and I can and I can uh, review concepts and teach concepts and right within the context window and get a level of understanding where if I say something a certain way, it's going to understand what I mean, right? And so like that level of personalization allows me to be effective, allows you to be effective, because now I understand this thing in my brain the way that I understand it. And now I can apply those concepts, right? And the model can actually help translate it and turn
I
it
was
into reality, turn it
the
into
way
code,
you were
turn it
just,
into.
yeah, but I almost think of it like the number one struggle in most organizations is communication.
Mhm.
So
That's where I
what?
was going next. That's where I
Oh,
was
that
going
is.
next.
Oh,
That's
damn.
that's where I was going
Okay.
next.
Well, then
So what happens?
please continue.
So what happens when every because this is a huge gap,
It
right?
is.
Because it's a massive gap, and it's like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense what you're saying, James, because if you just use terminology in your own way and you talk to somebody else, they're not going to understand it. Well, insert AI,
Yeah.
right?
Universal translator.
If my AI understands what I mean, right, in a business setting, I can then use it to translate what I mean to someone else. If we build systems that understand how different people understand things, that translation gets better.
Yeah.
Gets right. So,
Well, actually, it's interesting that you're saying that, because imagine how many times we've been in meetings, and actually, we do this with our offshore team. I do it a lot now,
mhm,
where we don't understand each other,
yep,
and I go straight to AI and I translate it into their terms, or I use like, cool, they want it in a user story with acceptance criteria, even though I think that I've egregiously or over egregiously like explained this to Gregorious detail. There's some freaking $5 words for you. So like, and AI's like boop 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 boop, just breaks it out, especially
yep.
O3. I have to hand it, like, O3 is my favorite model by far right now.
It's awesome.
I am
It's
hands
absolutely
down
awesome.
hardcore crushing that thing like nonstop on like I'm a big fan of O3. Especially O3 Mini High. Like I
Sure.
the
Yeah.
so like I don't know if you've noticed this, but O3 Mini versus O3 Mini High, I typically find myself using High more, even though they say it's for coding,
Hmm.
and
That's
not as
logical.
good. Yeah, it's exactly.
Yeah.
That's where I was going. I was like, I enjoy the structure and the way it
Hmm.
thinks more than O3 Mini.
Yeah. 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 It's for what you're using it for, then yeah, it's awesome.
But I think it's interesting what you were kind of saying, because I love where you were headed with the communication aspect, because it's almost like if you take personal intelligence, like from the concept perspective, and
Hmm.
you start to talk about like the amount of contextual understanding that you could gain
Yeah.
from like how I use terminology, how you use terminology, and creating a universal decoder, or even just allowing the AI to decode in organizations. Cool, they had this meeting. Hey, there seems to be a misunderstanding between alignment of goals, and let
Hmm.
the AI duke it out.
So yeah. So now I said that. Now I'm gonna
Play devil's advocate
I'm gonna
against
play
yourself.
devil's advocate with myself. Yeah, because language matters extremely deeply. It
Yeah.
really does. Words matter. And anyone who's worked with an LLM knows that words absolutely matter.
I
Um,
So
and
before
so
you go
you,
any further, I actually find this fascinating because, and my hair's driving me nuts. Um, I I have a large vocabulary,
okay,
and I enjoy words. And I know people who are way smarter than me, but LLMs are still a challenge for them to get them to do things. Now, yes, I have a completely different perspective on how I leverage them, but I also I go back to like some of our discoveries in the past summer. Me and you were just
hmm
deep in the weeds, and we found that like certain very specific terminology, like for lack of a better term, triggered the LLM, and it just
hmm
goes down this path. And once we learned like that trigger word, and I don't even think that like from a true model weighting perspective, they actually weighted it the way they did on purpose, especially at the size of the data that they were using. But it just so
hmm
happens that like if you stumbled upon one of those key terms, or one of those things that they just happened to just weight so heavily and used it the right way, it's gold, right? It's
hmm
gold. And I almost look at like your commentary on language, right? And some of the way that we look at prompting, because you prompt differently than I do, right?
hmm
We have similar
yep,
concepts, but like you are very methodical and very simple in your prompts,
hmm
depending on the model.
well, yeah, I use simple. Yeah, I keep things simple, but my prompting methodology is very hierarchical
Yeah.
in how I structure. So I'm more of a structure than a I like
I'm
yeah.
extremely descriptive in storytelling
Hmm.
and very diverse in my word
Right.
usage.
Yep. I'm very direct and logical structured, um, which actually is a little challenging for reasoning models. So
They don't like it.
I've had to adapt my prompting methodology to be better suited for reasoning models. But yeah, regular just vanilla models are I'm great at.
Well, and
But yeah, but
I tend
but
to
that
find
kind of goes
myself doing that when I get pissed. Like, oh, screw you! I'm going to
yeah,
essentially prompt hack you at this point. Like, you didn't do what
yeah.
I explicitly said, but I found that like, what did we call it a while ago? We were talking about it. Not a cognitive dump. It was like just conscious. You had a term for it, and I loved it. It's just like a conscious vomit. You just spill, like you just don't stop. Stream of consciousness, right,
Yeah.
is extremely powerful for pretty much any model, because the one thing that me and you came to a conclusion on that we tend to see with people is they never give it enough information, and they're almost too minimalistic in their prompt, and they accidentally step themselves into key terms that create hallucinations.
Yeah.
but when they stream of consciousness, just brain dump and talk almost, it overwrites some of those missteps, because there's just more contextual awareness.
Yeah. So yes, and that's also kind of that kind of ties into the point I was making earlier about like it's easy to give up, right? It's easy to get frustrated when you're working with models, especially like for the first time, and it's like, okay, cool, like it can write Shakespeare. It's like yes, but going back to like the point I was making is language is still incredibly important, even though I can understand something a certain way, right? We still have to have the core concept of having a common understanding, and that's why we have language to describe things, right?
Yeah.
And words have meaning. We still need that. I'm not saying like we don't need that anymore. And in order to translate between the way I understand something and you understand something, there still has to be a common grounding of that language to be able to translate.